Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel for another video in my history series. At Halloween I did a video where I talked about the evolution of Halloween, its origins and how it came to be the celebration that we know it to be today. Didn't actually do that well in terms of my videos, but I personally found it really interesting to research, so I figured I'd do the same for Christmas. You're probably thinking the evolution of Christmas, that's just a celebration of the birth of Jesus. But I'm gonna burst your bubble a little bit here. It's definitely not as simple as that, as the celebration actually predates the birth of Jesus, if you believe in that. This is not going to be a video focusing on Christmas in the religious sense, although I will obviously be talking about religion as that's a big part of it. But we won't be talking three wise men and the nativity and all of that. I want to really delve into the social and cultural evolution of Christmas, how it's evolved from yet another pagan festival, because that's right, just like Halloween, Christmas has its roots in paganism. I want to look at how did Christmas become Christmas. Of course, this video is sponsored by Magellan TV. As you probably know, we have an ongoing sponsorship, and I know that so many of you have already signed up to Magellan TV. So today I'd actually like to make my documentary recommendations first. Today I have to recommend Ellis Island, A History of the American Dream. As many times as I've visited New York, I've never actually made the trip out to Ellis Island, which is shocking. I always mean to, I've just never done it. And now I've seen this documentary, I feel like it's a must-do for my next trip. And the second documentary I have is Facebook Follies, The Unexpected Consequences of the Social Media. As someone whose career depends on social media, I am now scarred for life after watching this documentary, but it is a really interesting watch and it includes information that I think everyone should be aware of. For those of you who haven't signed up yet, Magellan TV is a streaming service dedicated purely to documentaries. I advocate education and bettering yourself and your knowledge at every single opportunity, so I really cannot recommend Magellan TV enough. They have everything from true crime to science, history, nature and everything in between, with new programmes added weekly that can be watched anywhere on your TV, laptop and mobile. It's compatible with Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Google Play and iOS, and loads of the programmes are available in 4K as well. Definitely check them out if you love documentaries as much as I do. But Christmas! So, Christmas today is an annual celebration which celebrates the birth of Jesus Christ and is observed in the majority of places on the 25th of December. In English, the name Christmas is just a shortened version of Christ's Mass, or the Mass of Christ, which is pretty obvious. Go back a couple of hundred years and it would be called Christmas, or a few hundred years and it was Christmas, which sounds pretty much the same, but I'll put the spellings up on the screen so you can see the difference. Or there's ye old English, Christus Massa. In Northern Europe in years BC, before Christ, pagan people would celebrate the winter solstice with something called the Festival of Yule. These ancient people would spend the majority of their time outdoors hunting, and therefore the seasons were very important to their way of life. Seasons dictated their lives in a way that they don't really nowadays. At the winter solstice, darkness reaches its peak with the longest night of the year, and after that point, the nights begin to get shorter once again. With the shortest day of the year usually being around the 21st, the 23rd-ish of December, that's usually when the Festival of Yule would take place. Fires would be lit from logs in an attempt to conquer the darkness and banish any evil spirits that may be around. The people would feast until the logs burned out and they'd drink ale that would be made throughout the year. Around this time of year, the people would decorate their houses with evergreens, hanging branches over windows and doors to bring life to the inside. This is an early form of a Christmas tree. It's also possible that the tradition of mistletoe also comes from pagan traditions as well, when druids would go out and cut it this time of year for use in summer rituals later on. So the Festival of Yule was held up in Northern Europe. There's also the Roman pagan festival of Saturnalia, which ran from around the 17th of December to the 23rd of December each year. Saturnalia was this huge annual celebration which celebrated the agricultural god Saturn. The courts will close, schools and businesses close. It was just a week-long party, feasting, drinking, singing, playing music and exchanging gifts. The wealthy gave gifts to the poor, executions got cancelled and no wars were announced during Saturnalia. It was basically this week-long party every December. Even slaves were allowed time off, and not just time off. The slaves were waited on by their masters for the duration of Saturnalia. The dictionary defines Saturnalia as an occasion of wild revelry or indulgence. Everyone just let loose. From as early as 217 BC, so 2,240-ish years ago, there were public Saturnalia banquets, and it seems like Saturnalia ran well into AD years as well. It went on for hundreds of years, this big festival every December. There's also another Roman celebration to mention here quickly as well. The sun god Sol Invictus was celebrated on December 25th each year, which was thought to be the date of his birth, when the solstice was generally over and the days began to get longer once again. It was known as the festival of Die Natalis Solis Invicti. Sol Invictus celebrated victory as he defeated darkness and rose every morning. But Sol Invictus was only introduced into the empire around 274 AD by Emperor Aurelian. It was never quite as big or as widely celebrated as Saturnalia, but it was a festival that was held on December 25th throughout some of the Roman Empire. But how did these become the Christmas that we know and love today? We all know the Christmas story, the birth of Jesus, 3 wise men, Virgin Mary, Son of God, and all that. Whether you believe it or not, you probably know the story. Like I said at the beginning of this video, this isn't really about that, so I'm not going to rehash a story that we probably already know fairly well. After death, pagans and Christians coexisted throughout Europe. Not always happily, but they coexisted. But slowly, Roman pagans began to convert to Christianity, bit by bit. Christianity started with 11 male disciples and just a handful of females in the Roman Empire who believed in and followed Jesus. There was just a handful of these very first Christians, about 20 of them if that. Yet within a couple of centuries, Christianity could count for about 3 million members. By the end of the 4th century, it was the official religion of Rome, with over half the empire being believers in Christianity. Pagans were becoming fewer and fewer. Pagan is defined as a person holding religious beliefs other than those of the main world religions. Pagans were polytheistic. They generally believed in many gods. Some the state gods of Rome, or family gods, mountain gods, meadow gods. There was a god for everything, and each god was responsible for a certain aspect of life. If there was a drought or a defeat in war or a disease epidemic, it was generally because they believed they didn't pray to the correct god enough. Pagans only believed that these gods were active in their present life. Once they died, that was it. There was never any mention of heaven, hell, or eternal punishment or reward. But with Christianity, there was/is only one god, and along with that came the threat of an afterlife. If you weren't a good person in life, if you didn't worship the right way, you would be eternally punished. This new way of thinking created this need for salvation that never really existed previously. So people converted to Christianity maybe out of fear or maybe out of this need for a deeper purpose in life. So Christianity grew pretty fast, and at first, as Christianity grew, paganism was tolerated. Poet Ambrosius Theodosius Macrobius, what a name, described Saturnalia festivals alive and well into 300 to 400 AD. But as time goes on, paganism becomes less tolerated. Within the Roman Empire, it became a case of you're Christian or else you'll be punished. The church's main focus was to convert these pagan people into a life of obedience with them, with the church. And remember that the church as well was a centre of political control at this time. It wasn't just religion, it was politics as well. So the church come up with a plan to convert people to Christianity. In the 4th century, Christian leaders import the Saturnalia festival to the religion, hoping to bring the pagan masses with it. Saturnalia, as we know, had no connection with Christian teachings. It predated Christianity by hundreds of years. But the church told people that you could be Christian and continue to celebrate Saturnalia as well. Christmas is the celebration of the birth of Jesus. Whether you believe in Christianity or not, that is technically what Christmas is. But there's no mention of the date Jesus was born in the Bible. The date of birth is a complete guess, and it's likely that Christian leaders, likely Pope Julius I, simply decided to celebrate it on December 25th to coincide with Saturnalia, knowing that eventually the birth of Jesus would overshadow anything else that was celebrated on that date. They may have also chosen this date because of Sol Invictus, but that was not as widely celebrated and wasn't as big as Saturnalia, so it seems less likely. There's actually a great quote that I read on The Independent in an article by a man called David Barnett that I'm going to read here verbatim because I don't think I could have worded this any better myself. It says, "It was 250 years later that Julius's successor, a few times removed, Pope Gregory, gave the job to St. Augustine of converting the heathen Brits to Christianity. Fortunately, with the birth of Christ now established as 25th of December, it gave Augustine a bit of leverage with the population who were already marking several midwinter festivals, ensuring that they could take this newfangled religion on board without losing the annual December piss-up." And this clearly worked because what do most of the Western world now celebrate in December? Christmas. People don't celebrate Saturnalia now, not really. Predating the 4th century, it was thought that Jesus was actually born on the 6th of December according to the Julian calendar. Today, we use the Gregorian calendar, which is much more accurate than the Julian calendar, which had too many days in the year. It had 13 to 14 too many days. Greek, Russian and most Eastern Orthodox churches still use the Julian calendar and therefore celebrate Christmas in early-ish January. You've probably heard of the 12 days of Christmas, which run from December 25th to January 6th, which was one of Jesus's early birthdays before they changed the calendar. A lot of people take down the decorations on the 6th, marking the official end of Christmas. Or if you're like me, you leave them up until early February until you can finally be bothered to take them down. Nowadays, it's actually believed that Jesus would have been born in springtime due to multiple mentions of shepherds and sheep in the Bible around this point. It's unlikely that there would have been sheep out on the hills in the middle of winter, and it's highly speculated that the actual date of birth would be March 25th instead of December. It's also Passover, the Jewish festival, in the spring, and Jews from all over the Roman Empire would have travelled to Jerusalem for the festival. This would have been a great time to take a census because everyone's travelling to the same place. In the Bible, it states that Mary and Joseph travelled to Bethlehem for the census, showing more proof that this was probably around springtime. It was St. Augustine who introduced Christmas in large to England, and from there it slowly morphed into the celebration we know today. Everyone celebrates Christmas in a different way, religious or not. Personally, I'm not religious, I'm atheist, but Christmas is still my favourite time of year. In the UK, it's definitely slowly moved away from being a purely religious celebration, although many people do of course still celebrate it for religious purposes. But for me and for many other people I know, it's a time of joy and celebration of family and the people around me. It's a time to show appreciation, exchange gifts and eat amazing food. In fact, in researching for this video, I realised that me and many other people probably celebrate Christmas as Saturnalia probably would have been celebrated, although not quite as raucous. We've identified already in this video where a few Christmas traditions originated, but what about the rest of them? Medieval Germans were actually the first ones to bring whole trees into their homes, and they would decorate them with candles and apples, and this carried on throughout the years in Germany. German immigrants began to bring the tradition to other countries across Europe, but it never really caught on. People didn't want a tree in their house, until Queen Victoria took the throne and popularised it. Queen Victoria was half German and her husband Albert was fully German. In fact, they only spoke German in the home together. And of course, being German, they always brought a tree into their house or palace and decorated it according to German tradition. This was the mid-1800s and everyone wanted to do what the Queen was doing. So finally, Christmas trees take off. Now it's unheard of to have Christmas without a tree in your home. They're everywhere you look this time of year. And for that, you can thank Germany and Queen Victoria for popularising it. Mistletoe. Mistletoe was always revered throughout history for having magical properties. It was seen as an aphrodisiac and a bringer of fertility. The ancient Celts saw mistletoe as a symbol of everlasting life. It was an evergreen, much like pine trees, and so would remain green all year round. And because of this, it was often used in winter solstice rituals. It's unclear exactly where the tradition of kissing under the mistletoe came from, but it's likely that it stems from Saturnalia and the thought that it had the power to bestow fertility, so couples would kiss underneath so they could make babies. Or in Scandinavia, mistletoe was considered a plant of peace, and therefore people would call truces in war or in arguments by kissing underneath a sprig of this peaceful plant. Christmas pudding has its roots in medieval England. It was called plum pudding, which was actually made from meat and root vegetables mixed with spices and fruits, and it was served at the beginning of a meal. The word plum in medieval England referred to any dried fruit, not just plums. It was a generic term. It began as a savoury dish, but as dried fruit became more plentiful in England over the years, it transitioned to a sweet pudding and slowly became associated with Christmas. Maybe because it would take months to make a true Christmas pudding, the fruits would be harvested in the late summer, and the pudding would tend to be ready around Christmas time due to this, so it became associated with Christmas. I personally love Christmas pudding, but I know it's a very controversial subject. A lot of people really hate it. But we haven't touched on one of the most magical of Christmas beliefs or traditions yet. Father Christmas, or Santa Claus if you're American. Good old Saint Nick. The original Saint Nicholas was a Greek saint. He was born in Greece, born around 280 AD, but later became a bishop in a small Roman town called Myra, which would now be in modern day Turkey. St. Nicholas was a kind man who spent a lot of his free time helping the needy, the poor, the sick. He would shower them with gifts and money that he inherited as a result of his parents dying when he was just a young man. There are many stories of him helping the people who needed it. One story tells of him helping 3 poor sisters who were on the brink of being sold into servitude by their father. He couldn't afford to pay their dowries, they couldn't get married. Nicholas would sneak into their house at night and just leave bags of money. He did this on 3 separate occasions for all 3 daughters. Nicholas was also an avid supporter of the Bible, of course, he was a Christian bishop. Around 303 AD, there was actually this great persecution of the church, and many priests were actually forced to renounce their religion or face execution. Nicholas refused and was exiled from Myra, and he spent years in prison before being released. He eventually died on December 6th, we don't know the exact year, but it would have been around the middle of the 4th century. And the 6th of December is still celebrated by the religious as St. Nicholas Day. He is a patron saint of sailors, merchants, archers, repentant thieves, prostitutes, children, brewers, students, and more. Leaping forward 1,000 or so years, Protestantism forms, and as a result, a lot of Europe turns away from saints. If you want more of an understanding of the Protestant faith, I'll leave a card on the screen somewhere up here and down below to my bonfire night video where I go a lot deeper into it. I'm not going to rehash it all here. But whilst most of Europe turned their back on saints, St. Nicholas remained a very important figure in Holland of all places. They continued to celebrate him each year with a big feast on the 6th of December. Children would leave their shoes out the night before, and in the morning they would discover gifts left for them by St. Nicholas in their shoes. To the Dutch, he was known as Sint Nicolaas, or by his nickname, Sinterklaas. Apologies to any Dutch people for my butchering of the Dutch language, but as the Dutch mass immigrated to America in the 1700s, they brought their tradition with them. Sinterklaas becomes Santa Claus, and instead of giving gifts on December 6th, the tradition slowly merges with Christmas and the gift-giving sort of tradition of Saturnalia. But Santa Claus wasn't portrayed as the jolly man with a beard until a poem was released in 1820 called An Account of a Visit from St. Nicholas by a man called Clement Clark Moore. It later became known as The Night Before Christmas. You probably know it. I'm going to read a quick excerpt from a poem that actually describes Santa as we know him today for the very first time. The poem goes as so. His eyes how they twinkled, his dimples how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard of his chin was as white as snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and a smoke encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head, soon he gave me to know I had nothing to dread. The Night Before Christmas, the first time we get a description of Santa Claus as we know him today. And although it gives a general description, it still did leave a lot to the imagination. And he was often actually depicted as wearing a green suit. It wasn't until the late 19th century that we got the full picture of Father Christmas, Santa Claus, as we know him today. A round-bellied man with a white beard and a red suit with white fur trim. It was in 1881 when cartoonist Thomas Nast drew the first cartoon of Saint Nick as we know him today. There's actually an urban legend that tells of how Coca-Cola were the ones who designed this red and white suit as part of an advertising campaign, but as far as I can find, this red and white suit does predate the 1933 campaign to 1881. Santa / Father Christmas / Saint Nick is one of the most universal symbols of Christmas worldwide. Whilst small details differ, there is almost always a jolly man who brings presents for children in the dead of the night in everyone's Christmas celebrations. And Rudolph is also the product of a poem. The rest of the reindeer that fly the magic sleigh are actually mentioned in The Night Before Christmas, but Rudolph was never mentioned until 1939 when he was brought up in a poem as part of a marketing ploy to lure customers into the Montgomery Ward chain department store in America. This retailer bought and gave away colouring books every year to children, but in 1939 they decided to save money by creating their own colouring book, along with a poem about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It sold 2.4 million copies in its first year of publication, and the story has obviously just grown from there. Really interestingly, I actually discovered something that I knew nothing about in this research process, in that there are actually quite a few Christian people who do not celebrate Christmas at all because of its pagan roots. Some people believe that by celebrating Christmas on December 25th, they're inadvertently celebrating the pagan / Roman gods and traditions, something which is apparently condemned. Some people also point out that there's no mention of Christmas or any such celebration in the Bible, nor do we even know that December 25th was really the birthday of Jesus. Or some people believe that it's just become too commercialised and is not focused on the birth of Jesus anymore. So it does seem like there are actually a lot of Christians turning away from Christmas as a whole. I find that really interesting. And when the Puritans and Oliver Cromwell rose in power, they actually attempted to rid England of all decadence and attempted to cancel Christmas as it was impure. This was hundreds of years ago in England. They believed it was wrong to celebrate any pagan traditions, and Christmas isn't mentioned in the scriptures at all. Oliver Cromwell banned everything Christmas related, but when Charles II was restored to the throne, he actually brought Christmas back in its full glory. And when the Puritans headed over to the New World, the USA, the new colonies didn't celebrate Christmas at all. Again, if you want more information on Puritans, the bonfire video is really good. I'll also link down below my Salem Witch Trials video, which goes a bit deeper into that as well. But when the Puritans headed over to the USA, they didn't celebrate Christmas at all. Anyone showing any sign of celebration or Christmas spirit would actually be fined. Interestingly, Christmas wasn't actually declared a holiday in the USA until June 1870. As I mentioned, I don't celebrate Christmas for religious reasons. Yeah, it is my favourite time of year. I just love the joy and the happiness that this season brings. I love that it's a time to show your love and appreciation for the people around you. I love the food. I know a lot of people say that it's become too commercialised, which might be the case, but I just think that adds to how wonderfully magical this time of year is. I just love Christmas time. I would love to know down below, what are your favourite Christmas traditions? Do you celebrate it for religious reasons or do you not? What are some traditions or things your family or even your country might have that might not be known to the rest of us? I'm trying to think of like a tradition that my family has, but I've suddenly gone really blank. We always have ham and egg in the morning for breakfast. I don't know if that's a Christmas thing, but we always have ham and egg in the morning for breakfast. I'm really excited. This time next week, I'll be eating a ham and egg. Can't wait. Don't forget to check out Magellan TV. The links will be in the top line of the description down below. If you celebrate, I hope you have a really wonderful Christmas and I'll see you in the new year. This is my last video of 2019, so I want to give a huge thank you to all of you guys for supporting me. Hopefully you can make 2020 even better, so I'll see you then. Merry Christmas!